since we know that we can take any vector, you know, as long as we know the magnitude, we know the direction, we can take that vector and we can break it down into its x and its y components. And we can do that just using simple trigonometry, basic right triangle trig. There's another way to get the resultant of vectors, concurrent forces. And that's by breaking all the vectors that you want to add together down into x's and y's. Because if I took this and broke it down into the x and the y, and I took this one and broke it down into its x and y, what do you think I could do with all the x's? Well, since they act in the same direction, I could just add them together, right? I mean, if this was x1 and this was x2, and this was y1 component, and this was the y2 component, they act in the same direction. So if you're giving somebody directions and you say, the first thing you want to do is go 5 steps south, and the second thing you want to do is go 4 steps south, you could just say, instead of giving them 2 directions, you could just say, hey, why don't you just go 9 steps south? So what you could do here to get the resultant of these is you could add, and this is just like scalar adding, x1 to x2, just add them together, sum the x's up, and then you could sum, similarly, the y's up. So you sum the x's together. This is the sum of the x. You sum the y's together, sum of the y's. And what have I constructed there? Little right triangle. This, as I draw this tip to tail, or I draw the resultant from the beginning of the first to the tip of the last, that resultant is going to be easily found because I can use what? Pythagorean theorem. Right triangle trig, Pythagorean theorem. Number one thing. If I want to find this angle here, what am I going to use? I've got the x, I've got the y, and now I've even got the hypotenuse, the result. I can use anything. I can use tangent, I can use sine, I can use cosine, I can find that angle. Okay? This is called the method of components. And the method of components says you take all these concurrent vectors that you want to add together, you break them all down into their x's and y's, you add up the x's, because they just now, even though they're x components, they're x component vectors, they all add up in the scalar fashion because they're in the x direction. You know what direction they're in. And you take the y components and you can add them up just like you're adding regular scalar numbers up because they all act in the y direction. So again, sum the x's, sum the y's. You got a number here, number there. You plug those numbers into the Pythagorean theorem, you find a result. To get the angle, you use whatever trig function you want, tangent, cosine, sine, and away you go.